So normally here on this channel, I don't actually talk about rumors just because the last thing I want to do on this channel is ruin my credibility by talking about something amazing that Apple or any other company might do in the future, and then that thing never happens. But I do keep up with rumors on the side while not reporting on them on the channel. And one of the rumors I had seen was that Apple was going to be holding an October event, and then the October event was canceled. So I didn't give it much thought. But then Apple actually decided to drop a little 9-minute video today and introduce a new generation for the baseline iPad, slap an M2 chip into the iPad Pro, and without mentioning it in the video, they also updated the Apple TV. Or at least if they did mention it in the video, I didn't see it, and I've only seen it once, so it could have. But either way, those are the big updates. We got a new iPad, an M2 iPad Pro, and a new Apple TV to talk about. So in this not scripted, very rushed, filmed in cinematic mode on my iPhone, which if you didn't notice or did notice, let me know in the comments. In this very odd video where I'm just going to give you my raw opinion on these new devices, we're just going to have some fun with it. And maybe if you like this format, leave a like, comment down below. But we're going to dive in, and I'm just going to give my thoughts as I read over the info we have here on these new devices. So let's get started. So first things first, we're going to start with the 10th generation iPad. Now for $329, you can still get the 9th generation iPad, the one with the home button, the 10.1-inch screen, and the lightning connector. But courtesy of the EU now forcing Apple, at most companies, but mainly Apple, to move over to USB-C, we are getting a new iPad with the USB-C connector. I did a whole video talking about the EU thing too. You can check it out over there. But yeah, it's got USB-C. It's $450, so it is quite the price hike, but it does give us the design language we've had now for a while with the other iPads, which is that squared off design, the liquid retina display, which basically just means it's an LCD display with curved edges and it goes edge to edge. Cool. They put the fingerprint reader up in the lock button, which makes sense. Looks like it is only rocking 2 speakers, just like the Air. Looks like it's the same size as the Air. However, one of the accessories they introduced looks like it actually kind of proves that it's not going to be compatible with iPad Air accessories, which is the Folio keyboard. Magic Keyboard Folio is what they called it. So it's got sort of a back piece with a kickstand, and then it's got the smart connector on the bottom of the iPad. And this is where you connect the keyboard. Interesting choice. If it doesn't have the smart connectors on the back, which from what I can tell it doesn't, that means that things like the Magic Keyboard case won't work. Other accessories that used the connector around back also won't work. So it looks like you just have to use the new accessory that Apple made. And they do have color-matched folio covers as well. That's kind of cool. But yeah, that's an interesting choice. Also, an interesting choice, though I can kind of see why they would do it this way, is that, number one, the camera is now moved from the portrait mode top center to the landscape mode top center. And this is, in my opinion, for most devices, the right place to put it. However, they put it up there for the first time on the base model iPad, and they didn't change it on the iPad Pro M2, so it's still off to the side, which for anybody who has ever recorded a video like that, you know how irritating it is. So it's kind of interesting they chose to do that. It's also interesting that they chose to introduce function keys onto this new keyboard when we still don't have it on the Magic Keyboard case. Now, the only reason that I can think that Apple would do this is because they're assuming that with this price point and this performance, courtesy of the A14 chip they're putting into this thing, most people are probably going to end up going with this iPad, because while there are some weird design choices, which we'll talk about one of the big ones in a minute, most people are probably going to buy this because it looks like a Surface, so it's probably going to pull some people over who are potentially looking at buying a Surface Go just because this is going to perform better than a Surface Go. It'll have more apps than a Surface Go to some degree. It'll run them properly, which is a big thing. And I know Windows people out there are going to say, oh, but it doesn't run Windows, so it doesn't count. Look, it's fine, because most people are just going to use it to browse the web, use it with some apps, and write some documents. This is a school or a college iPad, or it's going to be your grandma's for FaceTime. So it doesn't need to run Windows. It doesn't need to be super flashy or fancy. Even with it not having to be flashy or fancy, they did give you some new colors: blue, pink, yellow, silver. Kind of a cool choice. Also, another choice Apple made now makes sense, which was that originally they only had Stage Manager available on the M series iPads, and later on they moved it to be available on other iPads running the A series chips. Well, it's probably because they wanted to introduce this iPad and have Stage Manager available on it, and this was going to run an A series chip. So there you go. That's why they changed it. And I did say in a previous video that I thought that maybe it was memory management. I was wrong. I'll admit that I was wrong. They can do it on all the devices, and now they are. Now, a design choice that Apple made that I just find colossally stupid is the fact that this iPad uses the first generation Apple Pencil. And for those of you who don't remember the first generation Apple Pencil, because, well, it was universally loathed by a lot of us reviewers, the first generation Apple Pencil has a cap on the back that is covering a lightning port. Not even a port, actually. It's just a lightning end. And if you want to charge your iPad, you got to charge it like it's a lollipop. You stick it into the lightning port at the bottom. But I mentioned earlier that this uses USB Type-C. That means that if you buy a new iPad and you want to get an Apple Pencil for it, it comes with an adapter to run a C cable from the bottom of your iPad to this adapter that then lets you connect your Apple Pencil. That is extremely stupid, but it gets worse because if you're upgrading from an iPad that you already own an Apple Pencil for, you have to then basically get nickel and dimed for a $10 adapter to pair your already purchased Apple Pencil to your brand new iPad you're upgrading from. Why they didn't just use the magnetic connector on the top, which was, in my opinion, one of the best feats of design that Apple has done with these iPads. One of the huge, huge improvements they made among many for the iPad Pro. Why they didn't implement it here just makes no sense to me. But that's what they did. So if you have an Apple Pencil, you're looking to upgrade from an old iPad that used it, you can still use the Apple Pencil, but just factor in an extra $10 on top of that $449 so that you can get the adapter. But aside from that, I think that's it for this new iPad 10th generation. You can go up to 256 gigs of storage if you wanted to, and if you were just balling and wanted to go all out with the cellular model and you wanted to get the max storage, this will run you $749 with the max spec. So the 10th gen iPad was the biggest thing to be announced today because that was the one that had a full redesign, new port, well, USB-C finally, and just generally a bunch of new features. We have the smallest update, which is the M2 iPad Pro, which basically is exactly what it sounds like. The iPad Pro now has the M2 chip, which you might be familiar with if you watched any videos in the past few months of people like Luke Miani taking it outside on the roof of their apartment and running benchmarks till it cooks itself. Can't wait to see people benchmark the iPad into the ground because it's got the new M2 chip in it. Mark my words, it's going to happen. But yeah, so it doesn't look like this is actually the binned M2 either. So it looks like you get the full 10 GPU cores, the full 8 CPU cores for performance, for efficiency. And honestly, the M1 iPad Pro was already fast enough, so if you already have that, I don't think you need to upgrade. For most people, the iPad with the M1 chip is already incredibly capable. But now you have the M2, which I would say that if you're coming from potentially like maybe the first generation A12X version of the iPad Pro, this might be a worthwhile upgrade. Or if you're even further back than that, it would definitely be a worthwhile upgrade. But for most people, I think if you are already at the A12Z or the M1 iPad level, this is not really going to be a huge difference. It's design-wise, it's identical. You literally just get better Wi-Fi because you get Wi-Fi 6E. You get the new M2 chip that YouTubers are going to benchmark into the dirt and complain that it's not cooled well enough. And yeah, that's about it. Also, if you're wondering why I keep bringing up benchmarks, you can check out this video over there. I talked about why benchmarking these power-efficient chips until they cook themselves is dumb. But anyway, yeah, so those are really the big changes. It also looks like you can option this up to 2 terabytes now. So previously you maxed out at 1 terabyte. You can now get up to 2 terabytes. And just like before, The first three storage levels, 128, 256, and 512, have 8 gigs of RAM, but now 1 terabyte and 2 terabytes gets you 16 gigs of RAM. So if you do feel like for some reason your iPad needs 16 gigs of RAM to run benchmarks and cook itself, okay, I'll stop, I promise. But if you do feel as though you need to have more RAM for some reason, there you go. 1 terabyte's going to be your limit, or rather it's going to be your minimum, because that's what you have to get 16 gigs of RAM. Also, if you did want to max this thing out, not counting the keyboard case, which that keyboard case is still a cool $349. If you wanted to get that without that keyboard case, it's going to be $2,399 for a cellular model iPad Pro with the 2 terabytes of storage. That is spicy. That is MacBook Pro territory. Oof. Also, I forget if I mentioned, but the folio cover that was introduced on the 10th gen iPad Pro is $249 for that little two-piece thing with the back cover and the keyboard. I guess the last thing I'll say about the iPad Pro with the M2 chip before it comes up again in the recap here is that I think the biggest differentiator for this iPad Pro with the M2 chip is going to be the fact that now it has the dedicated hardware encoders for video built into the M2 chip. Granted, this video here that you're watching is going to be edited on my iPad Pro, so aside from some of the probably little editing tricks that I do on my computer, you're maybe not going to notice, and for performance, I've never noticed a difference. It's been insanely fast. I mean, I ran my whole channel off of an M1 chip for a year, so the M1 is no slouch when it comes to video, but having a dedicated HEVC and H.264 ProRes and ProRes RAW encoder, all those things in one chip, that would potentially help the video editor on the go. However, with this M2 chip, I can't imagine the battery life will be good, considering that on my M1 iPad Pro, the battery is already not good when I really push it. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. And then last on the list of updated devices is the Apple TV. Now, in terms of looks, it doesn't look any different. In fact, the only change I can see from the front is that they got rid of the TV part on it and just put the Apple logo in the middle. It used to say Apple TV, but now it just has the Apple logo. But it doesn't look any different. Around back's a different story, but we'll get there in a second. Something I did notice is that now every model is 4K, so whether you go with 129 or 149, they are all 4K capable. They finally ditched that god-awful HD version, which should have never existed past 2018, but they got rid of that. It is, with an exception, capable of using the Thread networking system, which, if you're not familiar with that, that is where your device can work as a central hub for smart home connections. Now, I'm probably one of a handful of people who actually uses HomeKit, but for HomeKit, I love Thread. I actually use it for my door sensor, because with my door sensor, you would either get the hub from the manufacturer, or because it can actually work with Thread, I can have it connected through one of my home hubs, which in my case is the HomePod Mini. So that's really cool. However, the exception is that if you want to use the Thread networking capabilities, you have to get the $149 version, because that's the one that has Ethernet. But what's dumb about that is that is also the one with 128 gigabytes of storage. Now, back when Apple first introduced the Apple TV and it had a hard drive in it, it made sense to have storage because you were downloading videos that you rented from iTunes. You weren't streaming them, you were downloading them. They would stay on a piece of storage, you'd watch them, and then they'd get deleted later. If you rented it, if you bought it, they could potentially stay there for a long time. However, having 128 gigabytes of storage on a streaming box in 2022 is pretty ridiculous, because I don't know of anybody who exclusively loads their Apple TV up with games to justify that 128 gigabytes of storage. But I do know a lot of people, myself included, who wire their Apple TV into their network directly, because that is the best way to have the fastest connection, not just to the internet so you can stream things more easily and more reliably, but it's also the fastest way to pull from your local network. I've talked about this before, but my M1 Mac Mini is my server. I have almost 14 terabytes worth of content on that thing, and it's the fastest way for me to pull data. Ethernet, wired in, ready to roll. And the fact that you have to spend $149 if you do want that luxury, that kind of sucks. I feel like that was something that could have potentially just been included on both of them. And I guess the last thing that was changed on the TV box itself is the fact that it now has the A15 Bionic chip. So you are getting last year's iPhone chip in the new Apple TVs. Not that the previous chips had any issues running 4K at high refresh rates, but there you go. If you want to play, you can't even play Genshin Impact on the Apple TV, so I don't know what you'd play on it that would require the A15, but there it is, and it's $149, which officially makes it the cheapest way to get yourself an A15 Bionic chip in the home. Now, the thing that did catch my attention, because I could really care less about the Apple TV, I have no desire to get another one because mine works fine. The part that caught my attention was the remote. Now, I did a whole review talking about the Apple TV remote. You can check it out over there. I actually talked about the whole Apple TV. It's an Apple TV review. But I talked about how that thing is damn near perfect. It's so much better than the last generation that they included with the other Apple TVs. It's aluminum, it's big, it's ugly, the battery lasts forever, it's got buttons that are clear, it's durable as hell, and in my opinion, it was almost perfect, except for the fact that it used lightning to charge, which wasn't a huge deal because it took forever to drain the battery anyway. But the new Apple TV remote has USB-C. Took them long enough, but we're finally here. It's finally got USB-C, and it kind of pisses me off because that was the only thing that kept that remote from being perfect, in my opinion. They finally added it, but you can put money down on the fact that I am not going to be spending, how much do they charge for that remote? Probably $60 or something like that. I'm not going to be spending that money to get the new Apple TV remote because mine hardly ever needs to be charged, so I'm not super concerned about it. And yeah, with that, it's summary time. And the biggest change today was the new iPad 10th generation. Now, again, they are still selling the previous generation iPad. So for the people who do not want to spend $450, you can still spend $330 and get the base model 9th generation iPad. And for a lot of older folks, or for people looking to get an iPad for kids, which I don't recommend, but if you do it, it's whatever, that's probably the one you want to go with. But for students, middle school, high school, even getting into college, I think the new design on the iPad with the folio is right in line competitive-wise with a lot of other devices that they could potentially be looking at to take with them to school. And in a lot of ways, it'll be supported better. It'll have more app options. It'll be more reliable. And generally, I think that that's where Apple was trying to aim, which again is why they implemented features that we've wanted on other devices for years, like the top center camera and the function row for your keyboard. So cool things there. Dumb design with the Apple Pencil not using USB-C and forcing you to use a C to Lightning adapter that is only going to be used once to pair the device and maybe once to charge the device. So dumb. It's about as dumb as the Lightning to Lightning adapter they used to include with the other ones. So, stupid thing there, but I guess it is what it is. The M2 iPad Pro, again, mark my words, I guarantee you there are going to be YouTubers who benchmark it to death and say that it's not cooled well enough, and those are the same kind of people who complain that their car blew up because it should be able to run at the red line for 4 hours straight without sending a rod to the moon, but I've made a whole rant video about that. You can check it out if you want. But either way, I think that if you're upgrading and you have an older iPad or potentially even an older iPad Pro, again, the A12X era, you could potentially justify upgrading to this and it would be fine. Aside from that, there were no other major changes. And then, of course, the Apple TV, which was an interesting change with some odd decisions like not including USB, or not including Ethernet, rather. But, yeah, if you want 128 gigs of storage for an Ethernet jack, I guess that you know where to look. And, of course, Apple making the almost perfect Apple TV remote perfect by including USB-C, even though I will not be buying it because there is nothing wrong with my other one except for the fact that it has Lightning. But that's been it. That's as much of a recap as I really care to do for these devices for now. I'm probably going to go to an Apple store and try out the two new iPads just to see how they are, and maybe I'll report back later and give a little bit of an update. But I'm not going to be buying either of them. They're not really worth it for me. I have the mobile devices that I care to have, and I have the ones I plan to use coming in soon for a review. So make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss that. hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to leave a comment down below if you have anything to input. Also, again, I'm reminding you, this is edited on my iPad and shot on my iPhone in cinematic mode. I'll be curious to know if any of you even noticed or if there were any weird things that gave it away. But along with that, make sure to like if you did like it and subscribe so you don't miss this. And aside from that, I'll see you all in the next video. Thanks again for watching. Make sure to be there and have a good one.